The monitor crackled. That soft, static hum is supposed to be comforting when you're a new parent. Proof the channel's open, the connection's steady. I'd been half asleep on the couch, eyes glued hazily to a rerun, while the green LED glowed faint beside me. Upstairs, my daughter's breathing filled the line in tiny, even sighs. Normal, safe. Then she babbled. A soft string of syllables, nonsense sounds only a baby could invent. I smiled. She did that sometimes, practicing her voice in the dark. I almost drifted off again, until another voice answered her. It wasn't my wife. She was asleep in the other room. It wasn't me, I hadn't moved. But through the soft static came something low, soft, deliberate, whispering words I couldn't make out. My daughter made a noise I'd never heard before then. A giggle, bright and delighted, as if someone had told her exactly the kind of joke she understood. The second voice chuckled faintly in return. Every hair on my body rose. I sat forward, ears pressed near to the monitor like it could explain itself. Static rose, hissed louder. My name fluttered in it, I swear, buried between the crackles. I waited for my wife to stir, for a creak of the stairs, for anything to prove flesh and blood made the sound. Nothing came.
Life with a newborn is a type of exhaustion you can't explain to someone who hasn't lived it. Days blur into nights, meals blur into feedings, and coffee becomes less a drink and more a form of survival. My wife and I had been stumbling through that haze for months, trading shifts, sometimes arguing from sheer fatigue, but always anchored by one truth. Every struggle was worth it the second we looked at her in her crib. The monitor was our lifeline. Before our daughter was born, I thought they were just gadgets for paranoid parents. But within days, I understood they were sanity. One of us could collapse on the couch and still hear her soft sighs upstairs. It meant we didn't have to hover constantly, didn't have to check every sound by creeping to the nursery door like anxious ghosts. That soft static was permission to breathe again. Our routine hardly changed. By 7, we read her a story, soft light glowing through curtains while she babbled happily in my wife's lap. By 8, she was usually asleep in her crib, blanket pulled high, the glow-in-the-dark stars on her ceiling faintly shimmering. Then came cleanup, dishes clattering, tired conversations that trailed into silence when words became too heavy. By 10, one of us usually passed out on the couch while the others slogged upstairs. My shift was the couch, mostly. Hers was the bed. Those ordinary patterns became sacred to me. Predictability was comfort. Every night when the monitor clicked on and crackled alive, I knew she was safe. I knew we were doing our jobs as parents, even on the nights when our hands shook from fatigue. That's why the first disturbance rattled everything, because it didn't just come through a cheap piece of plastic, it cracked into the one constant, our tether between rooms, the fragile system that let us believe this house was safe. Even after I heard the second voice, I tried explaining it away. Interference. Baby monitors pick up walkie-talkies sometimes, I read. Maybe a neighbor's phone crossing wavelengths. I clung to those excuses like lifelines, desperate to believe them. And if that had been the end of it, if it had just been static playing tricks on tired ears, I might have let myself believe. But the voices proved patient, and patient things wait for you to ignore them until you can't.
It started 3 nights later. The monitor had lulled me into its rhythm again, steady hiss of static, occasional sleepy grumble from upstairs. I was slouched on the couch, light from the TV flickering low, when I caught it. Not a babble, not a cry, a laugh. My wife stirred at the sound, halfway dozing in her chair. I froze. "Was that her?" she mumbled. I turned up the volume. The laugh had been too perfect, too composed. Not the high-pitched squeal of a 9-month-old, but something throatier, like the laugh of a child at least 5 or 6 years old. The monitor hissed again. Then another noise slipped through. A melody. Someone humming a lullaby. My chest went cold. We traded a look, wide-eyed. She grabbed my arm. "Go check." I bolted upstairs, heart jackhammering. The nursery door creaked as I pushed inside, instantly scanning the crib. Our daughter lay on her back, eyes shut, lost in steady breathing. Not awake, not smiling, definitely not laughing.
The room was still. No music box running, no window cracked for neighbors' radios, just air thick enough to taste. I hovered by the crib for minutes, waiting, begging for some logical sound to prove me wrong. Nothing came. Back downstairs, my wife held out the monitor like it was a loaded gun. "It was louder after you left," she whispered. We sat still, listening. The static hiss wavered, and over it, faint, playful words. I couldn't hear syllables clearly, but the rhythm was there. Someone talking to my daughter. Someone responding as if they were inches from her crib. And then the softest giggle again. Ours, not hers. I snatched the cord and yanked the monitor from the wall. The sudden silence slammed harder than the whispers. My wife buried her face in her hands. Neither of us spoke. The next morning, she rationalized. Maybe the monitor had glitched. Maybe it caught CB signals. Baby laughs echo weird when half asleep. Her explanations rattled as if she didn't even believe them herself. I didn't argue, but when I went to plug the monitor back in that evening, I hesitated. My thumb lingered on the plug as if I could hold the choice in suspension forever, because the memory clung to me like wet fabric. My daughter sleeping silent upstairs while something else borrowed her laughter through the wire. The following evening, we almost convinced ourselves it hadn't happened. Parents are good at lying if the lies protect their sanity. But when my wife went to change the crib sheets, she found it. A folded slip of paper. It was wedged between mattress and crib frame, smudged with age, as if it had been there long before my daughter was even born. She handed it to me with a look halfway between fear and exhaustion. "Did you put this here?" I shook my head, already sweating. The paper crackled dry as I unfolded it. Inside, 5 lines scrawled in thick pencil. Not childlike, not neat, written the way someone writes when their hands shake. Never answer a second voice. Never bring the monitor into the nursery. If the voice knows your name, unplug everything immediately. Your baby is never crying alone. Leave if the laughter continues more than 3 nights in a row. I read it twice. Each sentence hit harder. My wife rocked on her heels, clutching the changing blanket like a lifeline. "It's a joke," she whispered uncertainly. "It has to be a sick joke. Somebody's messing with us." I wanted to agree, but nobody broke into nurseries to slide ominous rules into cribs as a prank. And if it was a joke, how had it known? The voices, the laughter, the timing. That night, I kept the monitor unplugged, left it sitting on the coffee table like it might infect anything it touched. The silence upstairs stretched unbearably. No static meant no reassurance. We hovered half the night just outside the nursery, cracking the door every 10 minutes to make sure our daughter's chest rose. By dawn, our nerves were shot. We fell asleep with the curtains glowing pink. Later that day, while I paced the kitchen with the baby in my arms, my wife picked up the folded note again and read the final line out loud. "Leave if the laughter continues more than 3 nights in a row." She set it down slowly. "It's already been 2. The words thundered in my skull like a countdown. And that night, despite my refusal, despite our pact, despite fear as thick as tar, we plugged the monitor in again. Static hummed like a trap being set. We lasted 15 minutes. At first, only the comforting static hummed through the monitor. My wife sat stiff on the couch, knuckles bloodless around a mug she wasn't drinking. I stared at the green LED,
hypnotized, waiting for the wrong sound to puncture the quiet. Then it came. A soft cry. Our daughter's usual wail. Startling but familiar. I leapt to my feet, halfway to the stairs when the crying stopped. Not slowly, not fading. Cut off. Like a hand smothered it mid-sob, the monitor popped once with static, then carried a new sound, a voice, low, coaxing, hushed just enough I nearly missed it. The cadence was wrong for a lullaby, too deliberate, too conversational, it whispered, as though soothing someone much older than an infant. My wife's eyes widened. She mouthed "don't," shaking her head violently, but I couldn't stop myself. Fear clawed into my throat and broke out in one terrified syllable. "Who's there?" The monitor went silent for half a heartbeat. Then it answered, "You know me."
I nearly dropped it. My wife shoved back in her chair like she'd been struck. The voice chuckled softly, a dry, scratchy sound that carried weight far too deliberate. The static hiss carried words now. Closer. Bring it closer. I clicked the volume down, a useless reflex, but the voice grew louder, sharper, like it adjusted itself. Your baby isn't crying, she's laughing. I bolted up the stairs, monitor rattling in my grip. The nursery door hung ajar, shadows stretching from the nightlight in uncanny shapes. Inside, my daughter lay still, asleep, chest rising steady as dreamers. No cries, but both sides of her mattress were pressed down, indents fresh as if someone had lain beside her and only just risen. Behind me, the monitor whispered again. My name. Clear this time. Clearer than my wife's voice calling it any day. I snapped the unit off with a shiver, white knuckle tight around it, heart lurching in my chest. But the silence that followed didn't comfort. It accused. I'd broken the rule. And whatever threaded itself through the wires now knew I was listening.
By the next night, neither of us wanted the monitor on. My wife pressed for old-fashioned vigilance instead. Trade shifts at the nursery door, listen ourselves. No wire, no plastic in between. But fatigue is a predator. Parents can only run from it so long. Around midnight, her eyelids sagged, and I, fool that I am, switched the monitor back on. Too tired to pace stairs endlessly. Too desperate for that hum of static reassurance. The screen blinked alive. We hadn't used the video feed in months. Poor reception, fuzzy outlines distorted by darkness. But this time the picture was unnervingly crisp. My daughter's crib glowed, perfectly framed. She slept soundly, fists clutched against her cheeks, mouth parted in baby dreams. For a long moment, I dared breathe easier. Then the feed warped. Not wild distortion, but subtle, a faint shadow at first, rippling at the crib's edge. The way something transparent refracts light when it moves. I leaned forward, nose nearly kissing the pixelated glow. Something leaned into frame. Not a full form, just suggestion. A curve near the pillow, black where no shadow should be, and close to my daughter's head, impossibly close. The distinct tilt of something bent forward, as though whispering into her tiny ear. Static pulsed across the audio channel. Within it, syllables shaped themselves, hushes, lilting consonants, almost lullabies, but wrong at the core. My throat closed. The urge to shout for my wife battled the terror of breaking that heavy stillness. Instead, I grabbed the monitor, shook it like defective plastic could shake out what I was seeing. The figure remained. And then, the worst part, my daughter smiled in her sleep. Not a twitch, not random baby muscle, a broad, knowing smile, unnatural in its awareness. Her lips even moved slightly as though repeating what she heard. The shape bent closer. I killed the feed. Screen blinked to black, static shrieking once before silence choked the room.
My own face trembled against the shine, sweat blurring my reflection. When my wife stirred awake, I lied. Told her nothing happened. Told her she'd been right to avoid the monitor. But I couldn't make myself unplug it, because the pull was stronger now. I needed to see. Even when horror froze my blood, that night, every blink of sleep was blocked by the image still burned in my mind. A presence leaning close to a crib, whispering secrets my daughter should not know, and rules repeating like sermons in my skull. Never bring the monitor into the nursery. Never answer a second voice. It didn't matter anymore. I'd already broken both. By dawn, my nerves were shot. I couldn't shake the image of that shadow curling near her head, couldn't silence the memory of my daughter's smile. Something was wrong with the house itself. I knew it. So when the baby napped mid-afternoon, I drove to the county records office. Small towns are graveyards with paperwork. If you dig far enough, you'll find what the living want forgotten. The clerk gave me the property file without hesitation. House on Miller Road? That's an old one. She chuckled without warmth, like a librarian who knows more than she'll say. The file was thick. Deeds, sales, renovations. Most of it banal. Until 1943. Noted in faded ink, property acquired by St. Agnes Children's Home. My breath hitched. It had been an orphanage. Cross-referencing newspapers filled in the rest. A fire swept through the upper floors in winter of 1946. 13 children were listed as casualties. Only 2 bodies recovered whole, the others unidentified among smoldered wreckage. The matron who ran the place swore she heard them crying long after flames were out. Articles dismissed it as guilt, trauma. By the following week, the voices were no longer content to whisper alone. It happened while I was washing bottles in the sink, the monitor propped on the counter. At first, it carried the familiar hiss of static. Then, faintly underneath, I caught it. Not one voice, but several. They overlapped. Children's pitches at first. Giggles, hush chatter, like kids swapping secrets under covers. Then, others joined. Low tones, older voices. A chorus of whispers layered too thick to separate. And all of them wove my name through their noise, again and again, like a chant spreading through invisible mouths. I yanked the plug from the wall. The voices didn't stop. The monitor, dead and dark, still shivered faintly with sound. When my wife came down, pale with sleep, I was already stuffing it deep into a drawer. I told her we'd quit using it altogether. But we both knew our daughter had never been safer inside her room than when we could hear her sighs. Quitting meant blindness. It felt like suicide. So we argued, whisper shouts at each other until she cried with exhaustion. I promised I wouldn't use it, but in the small hours when she crashed, I pulled a spare one from storage. That's when the neighborhood woke too. Next morning, Mrs. Henderson from across the street asked, "Did you hear that last night?" Her kitchen radio had switched on by itself at midnight, she said, and all she heard was a room full of children giggling and static. She looked rattled, her eyes bags of sleepless fear. I lied, said no. But the Johnsons 2 doors down complained too. Their baby monitor hummed until it burst loud with laughter so sharp it sent their twins screaming. Whatever haunted our wires wasn't confined to my house anymore. It traveled through cords, through airwaves, through every plastic shell designed to soothe parents into false security. That night, it reached a crescendo. I sat, rigid, on the couch. The monitor fuzzed to life, though it was still unplugged. Voices gathered in unison, too many to count, chanting soft and malicious through that tiny speaker. Your baby isn't alone. Your baby isn't alone. Your baby isn't alone. And then, silence. My daughter's voice came crystal clear then, a beautiful giggle, bright and impossibly articulate,
whispering back something in words she could not yet speak. My blood iced, because she had answered them.
We didn't wait this time. The second the giggle slipped through the speaker, followed by that impossible string of words, my wife shot upright. The fear on her face erased every argument we'd had about monitors or rules. She grabbed my arm with white-knuckled force and whispered, "Now! We check now!" We ran. The hallway seemed twice as long, shadows curling from the nightlights as if they leaned to watch us past. I nearly ripped the nursery door off the hinges when we pushed inside. At first glance, relief. She was fine. Our daughter lay sleeping, peaceful as ever, tiny fists curled, breath rising soft and steady. But then my wife gasped. Her hand shot to her mouth. I followed her eyes to the crib. The bedsheet was pressed down on either side of the baby's small body, the fabric indented deep, as if two larger forms lay on both sides of her, the kind of dents only made when weight has been there for a while. Yet no one was there when we entered. My wife stammered, No. I reached into the crib, touching trembling fingers to the sheets. The indents were warm, warmer than the baby, warmer than human skin had any right to be.
The monitor crackled behind me, though I'd left it unplugged. This time, the voice wasn't murmur or hiss. It was full, rising through static loud enough to shake picture frames on the wall. "She is not alone," the voices sang in chorus. I snatched my daughter into my arms, backing away until my spine pressed against the wall. My wife clutched the side of the crib, sobbing. The room buzzed with suffocating pressure, air vibrating as if the voices were crawling just under the paint, beneath the floorboards. Then, the crib shifted. Wood groaned as if invisible weight pulled itself upright. For a terrifying heartbeat, I thought I could see impressions of hands burned faintly into the rails, pressed from inside. My wife screamed. I bolted down the hall, daughter tight against my chest. Behind us, the whispers slithered through cords, through walls, through the unplugged monitor lying dark on the carpet. They didn't chase with footsteps. They didn't need to. Instead, their laughter chased. Spirals of childish giggles echoing upside down through the house, splitting and doubling until it felt like thousands of tiny mouths laughed just under our ears. By the time we collapsed in our bedroom, door locked, daughter squirming but safe in my arms, I finally understood something the crib's note had warned us. Your baby is never crying alone. And that was somehow worse than any scream.
We should have left the house. We should have run out into the night, baby in arms, never looking back. But fear freezes as much as it moves, and exhaustion blinds more than any fog. It happened 3 nights later. The monitor, no matter where we hid it, no matter if it sat unplugged in the closet or broken apart on the garage floor, still turned on at midnight. The little green LED glowed. The speaker hissed. And when it hissed, the voices poured through. Hundreds by now, maybe thousands. Children and adults, high and low, all babbling and chanting, laughing, crooning my name, my wife's name, our daughter's name, over and over. Sometimes in perfect chorus, sometimes in fightsome overlap, a marketplace of ghosts all shrieking for attention. That night, my brain snapped. I scooped the monitor from the floor as it crackled and shouted into it with every ounce of rage and terror. "Stop! What do you want from us?" The voices halted instantly. The silence was worse than any scream. For 5 seconds, I thought maybe I'd killed it. Maybe acknowledgement was what it had needed all along. I laughed once, manic and hollow. My wife sobbed against the wall. Then the reply came, not faint, not layered. One voice, full and clear, as though the speaker itself were a mouth pressed mere inches from my ear. "We want her." My spine locked. My arms instinctively clasped our daughter tighter, even as she slept soundly, unbothered. The monitor screen flickered. Static dissolved into video feed. At first, we saw only the crib, empty. Then, from the bottom of the frame, dozens of small faces crawled into view. Children's faces, pale and wide-eyed, some burned, some waterlogged, some smiling too far. Their mouths moved in eerie synchronicity as they stared upward into the camera rather than at the crib, and they were mouthing my daughter's name over and over and over. In the background of the feed, the room stretched impossibly longer, walls bowing like elastic pulled thin. Dark figures leaned out of those impossible angles. Tall silhouettes who bent down to whisper into children's ears. Each whisper birthed another giggle. Each giggle made the crib indent deeper. We screamed together. I hurled the monitor against the wall, shards spitting across carpet. For a blissful second, silence. Then, from the broken pieces, their laughs cracked alive again, stitched together in electronic shrieks, and I realized it didn't matter if we smashed it, burned it, buried it. We had broken the rule. We had answered. And when you answer the second voice, it always answers back.
We didn't think. Thinking was too slow. The second the monitor sparked to life again, we gathered what we could. My wife clutched our daughter, swaddled in the first blanket she grabbed. I tore cords out of the wall, yanked nightlights out of sockets, pulled batteries from every toy that hummed or sang. For a moment, I thought it worked. Silence spread across the house. Then the TV in the living room flipped on by itself. No picture, just red haze and static. And in the static, dozens of little shapes pressed against the screen like hands against glass, mouths moving, sound muted at first, then cascading outward in a room-filling chorus. My daughter's name bubbled up through them until it scraped raw. We bolted. Front door kicked wide, storm wind dragging against our backs as we fled into the street. Mrs. Henderson's porch light flicked on across the way. I thought maybe we could wake her, explain, beg for help. But her kitchen radio clicked alive before we even reached the sidewalk. I heard giggles in it. Then, as light spilled across her curtains, faint shadows bent long across her stove. Children's laughter rushed from her walls like ghastly kisses. We sprinted faster, turned into the Johnsons' driveway, half out of breath. They'd just run out too. Father, mother, both clutching their twins tight. Their eyes were hollow with the same terror. "You hear it too?" I rasped. He nodded quick, teeth chattering. "Started last night. Now it's in the TVs. They said her name." His voice cracked. "Our daughter's name." We fled together down the block, a stampede of terrified parents clutching children as laughter rolled after us through the quiet neighborhood. Porch lights flickered in dizzy succession. Houses breathed giggles through microwaves, echoes through heating vents, static hums through phones still cradled on their receivers. The whole street was alive with the lost. By the time we staggered into the edge of town, sweat freezing against our backs, none of us spoke. None of us needed to. The monitors had been wrong all along. This wasn't about our house, or even our child. When you break the rule, you don't just invite the lost in, you invite them out, and they move fast. Now, even in borrowed silence, motel with no TVs, unplugged lamps, walls thick enough to muffle screams, I can still feel them writhing across the signal, searching, testing, waiting. Not for a house, not even for me, for her. Our daughter still coos softly at empty corners, eyes tracking shapes we can't see. And when she giggles in her sleep, it sounds too close to the cadence I heard in the monitor static. They've already found her. It's been 3 weeks since the monitors first spoke.
We don't sleep much anymore. We take turns holding her at night, whispering lullabies we barely believe ourselves. And still, I feel them perched around us, unseen but not unfelt. The lost, waiting, listening, tapping their fingers across every wire and screen. We ripped the electronics from the walls, smashed phones, burned the monitors in the backyard, threw the television into the dump. And yet, the voices don't stop. Sometimes they slip into the hum of a lamp we forgot to unplug. Sometimes we catch them swimming beneath the static of car radios when we drive miles from home. Even when every device is dead, sometimes the baby laughs at shadows, as though jokes are being whispered just beyond what we can hear. I think she sees them. I think maybe children always could, before the rules were ever written, before someone scrawled desperate warnings on scraps of paper and hid them in cribs. And the rules are clear, though I broke them all. Never answer a second voice. Never bring the monitor into the nursery. If the voice knows your name, unplug everything immediately. The baby is never crying alone. If the laughter continues for more than 3 nights, leave. We should have left. We should have run the second night. Instead, we waited. We hesitated. I answered. Now the voices know me, and I know the counting will not stop.
Sooner or later, they will take her. They don't bang on walls or drag chains at night. They are patient. Patient things always win, because eventually exhaustion makes you slip. Eventually, they'll slip all the way into her room, into her crib, into her. Maybe into yours, too. Because this isn't just my house. It isn't just our family. Neighbors hear them now. Their twins wake screaming from laughter no parent makes. Radios in distant towns turn murky at midnight, carrying the same chorus. I think the lost used to be confined here, to one fire, to one house. But answering let them spread. It's not superstition, it's infection. The truth is as simple as it is monstrous. Every monitor is a doorway. Every static line a rope. The second you listen, the second you acknowledge, the second you answer, the rope snaps tight around your name. That's why I'm leaving behind this warming.
Because maybe you're a new parent too. Maybe you're cooing into a monitor at this very moment, about to shush your baby back to sleep. Maybe you're laughing softly when interference pops, when a second lullaby hums against the air. You'll chuckle at the absurdity. You'll tell yourself it's just radio bleed. And maybe, out of curiosity, fear, or exhaustion, you'll whisper back, "Who's there?" Don't. If you hear a second voice on the baby monitor, don't answer it. Don't even acknowledge it. Unplug it. Throw it out. Burn the wires. Tear down the antenna. Do whatever it takes to sever the rope before it winds your name tight. Because once it knows who you are, it doesn't stop. It doesn't leave. It waits, laughing patiently beside the crib, pressed deep into mattresses, leaving indents you can't explain. And sooner or later, you won't know whether it's your child giggling in the dark or whether the lost have finally succeeded in teaching her their joke.